Hey, students, it is time for budgeting. That's right, the dreaded B word. We're talking about budgeting today. So this is kind of unique. Usually we do this more in a class discussion, but thought I would put this together in a video. The first thing that usually when people think about a budget, they think it's a way of cutting back expenses, or the dreaded B word. It's not really the case. A budget is really a plan for spending your money. Similar to the way that diets are not just a way of losing weight, there's all sorts of diets, including weight gain diets. There's also diets for specific allergies or specific conditions. A budget is really just a plan for spending your money. Now, a lot of times a budget is designed to help save money or get people out of debt. That is true. But even people who aren't in debt have a plan for their money, and that's what a budget is. One thing you're going to have to plan for is emergencies. Now, an emergency fund is established to help you deal with the unexpected or unplanned events that can and will occur in your life. These can include things like car repairs, home repairs, medical bills, unplanned travel expenses, like in the case of an illness or death of a faraway relative that you need to go see. Or it could be that, you know what, we are now locked up in our house for 6, 7, 8 weeks, and we are doing things remotely, and we need a little bit more technology or something like that, and we need to order some things that normally we would not be doing. It's emergencies. So we're going to be setting up for emergencies. Without an emergency fund, usually those expenses, when an emergency, wind up on a credit card in the hopes that you can pay them off. But usually they just leave us with a whole bunch of extra debt. These type of expenses will happen. You need to be prepared for emergencies. Emergencies will happen. Okay, now there's a few reasons why people don't prepare, that other than just taking a look at, well, I don't have the money, I've got too much in debt. One of which is someone else is always going to be responsible to look after us. It could be a parent, friend, government. It's always somebody else's job. It's not our own responsibility to be prepared for emergencies. That is not really a good example. Everybody knows emergencies are going to happen, and you do need to have somewhat of an emergency stash. Defeatism. There's nothing I can do anyway, therefore don't prepare. Sometimes people spiritualize this also with us taking a look and saying, well, if God is in control, or it's too costly, too complicated, I don't know how it works, so I'm just going to avoid it altogether, which really, if emergencies are going to happen, not a great excuse. Is it biblical not to save? You see some verses such as Luke 12:24. Consider the ravens, do they not sow or reap? They have no storeroom or barn, right? The idea of no storeroom or barn, no savings, yet God feeds them. How much more valuable are you than birds? Or do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy. Matthew 6. However, if we take a look at Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, which I admit is not a book necessarily of theology, however, of wisdom. Dishonest money dwindles away, but he who gathers money little by little makes it grow. Proverbs 13:11. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. Proverbs 21:20. A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. Proverbs 13:22. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that we don't put our faith in the fact that we have emergencies, an emergency fund. That is not where our faith comes from. That is not where our hope comes from. Our hope does not come from our emergency fund. However, it is still wise for us to prepare for it. Right? Sometimes people justify not saving as usually a veil for their own greed. You've probably heard the two most valuable asset is You've heard that the most valuable asset is time. That has two ideas with it. First, with few entanglements and draws on your time, you can devote more of it to your career. And second one is the compound interest effect that comes with savings. Now, compound savings basically means that as you start to have interest or make interest, that interest actually also makes interest. And usually over a year or two or three, it's not going to be that much noticeable. But over the course of 10, 20, or 30 years, you are going to see this. Now, this is just a quick little chart of $20 savings per week and how much money they have after so many years. After 30 years, you've put in just a little bit over $30,000. However, because this interest also keeps growing and you're making interest on the interest is far away. You're almost at $90,000 for only putting in $30,000 over 30 years. It grows. Let's take a look at another way. Investor A started saving and investing $100. That would be $100 a month at age 20 years old, and it compounded at 7% over 46 years. Until you're 65 years old, you will have accumulated $407,915.42. That's for putting in $55,200. Or you've made over $350,000. Now, investor B consumes his way around enjoying life and starts investing at age 30, which is only 10 years later. So he figures he needs to put in a little bit extra, and he's putting in $150 a month until he reaches the age of 65. Or investor C, not financially savvy and keeps putting off retirement. When he's 40 years old, he finally starts putting in 3 times the amount as investor A, $300 a month. Well, what do investors B and C end up with? Well, investor A, $100 a month, 18 to 65, has $407,915.42. Investor B, at $150 a month, only $219,546. And investor C at $300 a month, 3 times the amount of investor A, only $264,000. So, which one would have saved up most money in this scenario? 6% interest, $100 a month from 18 to 30, and then stop. So at the age of 30, you stop putting money in and waiting until you're 65 before you collect it. Or going all the way from 30 to 65 at $100 a month. Or starting just 5 years later from 35 to 65 at $150 a month. Well, given by the way of the question, you're probably already guessing this $100 a month here. Now this person at 6% would be sitting at $165,000 with $14,400 invested. Person B, $141,800 with almost 3 times the amount of money invested. And person C has a little bit more, but they also invested more. Person A has the most by a long shot, and that is because of the magic of time. Another thing your budget should have is giving. The idea that God does not need your money or is kind of, well, that's true, but that's not why God asks us to give. God changes us through the practice of giving. Corinthians 8, verse 9 says, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and that he is rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that through his poverty you could become rich." Again, 2 Corinthians is telling us that God is planning us to change. He wants us to be giving like he is giving. Matthew 6:24 says, "No one can serve 2 masters. He will either hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." If we're hoarding all our money and not giving, we wind up putting that money in position of our God. Right? Now, in this context, specifically, Jesus is teaching about true discipleship, and he's answering the question, what does it mean to really follow Jesus? Jesus chose money as the example to illustrate. He chose money because money seeks to compete with our following of Christ, of our giving. It's an idol of ours. Now, when we give, there's a few things that do happen. First of all, we identify and exemplify that God is our source of trust, peace, hope, love, desire, and need. We imitate Christ. We remove money from the ruling position and relegate it to a servant position. It is a tool for us to use, not an idol that we serve. And we have an opportunity to help others and to show love to others. Now, within every budget, there are some recommended amounts. Now, this is a secular thing. 35% of your budget, and now this would be your take-home budget, should be devoted towards housing. 10% to savings, 15% to debt repayment, 15% to transportation, and 25% towards your other life things. Now, notice that there's no giving in here. However, if you do not have debt, you've got a 15% pie, section of the pie, that's really there for you to be giving. Right? Housing does not just include your mortgage payment, but also taxes, maintenance, and utilities. Transportation does not just include your savings for a new vehicle, but also gas, maintenance, repairs, even licensing. Savings includes your retirement and emergency savings. And all the life includes eating, entertainment, clothing, gift, and other miscellaneous expenses. Now, that's not to say if you're able to cut down on your housing expenses. If you can't, trying to cut down on these housing expenses, you can't put it in other situations. But these recommended amounts are more about saying, if you're going over and you're having budgetary problems, this is a tool to help identify what the amounts are. These amounts will be different for each